Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ben Talks About. I'm of course your host, Ben Contreras. Now, before I get started, I just want to say, God damn Nintendo, you have given us so much news for the latest game in the Smash Bros. Franchise, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for the Nintendo Switch, just a couple of weeks ago during the last Smash Direct. You have given us a grand total of 5 new playable characters that are joining the roster, which is probably like a new record for you guys. Now, I'm sure there are a ton of people who have made videos of their own discussing what characters they want to see make it to this next installment, and I personally have one in particular that I think will be quite different compared to what most people I find on YouTube make. So, the character that I want to see make it to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for the Nintendo Switch is this dude right here. So, Cecil Harvey from the game Final Fantasy IV for the Super Nintendo. Now, there are a couple of reasons as to why I want this guy to join the roster, some a bit more prominent than others. The first reason as to why I think he would make a good addition is because it would give us a lot of fresh air in terms of representing the Final Fantasy franchise in Smash Bros. After all, the only other character that's in this game from the Final Fantasy franchise is Cloud from the 7th entry. And while it does kind of make sense as to why they would include Cloud instead of a more Nintendo-oriented sort of character, because Cloud is obviously comes from the most popular entry in the entire series. But I feel like having a character from the old school not Castlevania, I've been playing too many of those games, a character from the Super Nintendo Final Fantasy games, that would give the series a bit more fresh air and would allow a lot of probably newcomers to the franchise know that the type of characters that existed before, you know, the PlayStation and more futuristic era of the Final Fantasy franchise that the series later became known for. I feel like having a character like Cecil would allow that to happen. The second reason as to why I want to see him make it into this game, despite the fact that these new Echo Fighters are probably going to be more of a prominent thing when it comes to new characters, as, you know, you introduce an idea, you better, you know, do something with it. But I feel like there's still a whole lot of potential in the alternate costumes aspect that Brawl and eventually Smash for 3DS and Wii U really started to perfect, I'd say. Characters like, you know, Olimar, Robin, the Wii Fit Trainer, and eventually Corrin as DLC, and even Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, all those characters had certain costumes that really gave them their own sort of flair. And I feel like Cecil would fit perfectly in this because of both his Dark Knight and his Paladin classes he has in both of his games, which could also lead to different aesthetics for his moveset because of both his dark and light magic that he uses when he uses both those classes. So I think it would add a bit more flair to the alternate costumes aspect of the Smash Bros. Series, and it's something that I would like to see continue on with other characters. But the biggest reason as to why I think Cecil would be a good addition to the Smash Bros. Series is because, to me, a character like Cecil represents a sort of he's kind of a symbol of many North American audiences' introductions to JRPGs. Because before Squaresoft and their popular JRPG franchise came to the West, not many Americans knew about these JRPGs that existed all the way over to the East. A lot of times it was only reserved for tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons and some very old computer games like the Ultima franchise. But when Final Fantasy came out in North America, it introduced people to this new concept of, a role-playing game, a type of genre that we had never really seen as much as, as it was in Japan. Sure, technically, Dragon Quest, I believe, predated Final Fantasy when it came to localization, but Final Fantasy did have much more of an impression. And when Final Fantasy IV came out, when it was renamed to Final Fantasy II in the West because of you-know-what, it was really everyone's introduction to this type of storytelling. Characters that weren't just representations of the player, but rather their own actual characters. Characters like Cecil, they had depth to them. They weren't just a blank slate for the player to identify themselves as. He had his own likes, dislikes. He had his own journey before the game even took place, and he went through his own redemption arc throughout the game. And to me, no other real protagonist in a role-playing game was like this, at least in the westward side of the world. So I think Cecil would be a good symbol of how we sort of view RPGs to this day, and really without characters like Cecil and without his game entry to introduce us, we wouldn't have gotten, all these great RPGs that are, really praised to this day, like the other Final Fantasy entries, or stuff like, the rest of the Dragon Quest series, or Secret of Mana, or Chrono Trigger. All those games really have Final Fantasy IV to thank for them existing. And I think that would be even though it seems a little bit cliche to say that, I think that's personally one of my reasons as to why I'd like to see Cecil Harvey make an appearance in Smash Brothers for the Nintendo Switch. But what do all of you think? Do you agree with who I want to see join the roster, and who do you want to see join the fighters in this next entry? And also, how hype are you for this next installment? Because after that last Smash Direct, I am very excited for when this game comes out. So I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Ben Talks About, and I hope you all enjoyed also the new scenery that this video decided to have. And until we meet next week, I am Benjamin Contreras, and as always,